everyone, and welcome to HearSay Shorts. I'm your host, Sojin, the director of brand and design at AudioEye. I'm a Korean woman with short brown hair and bangs, wearing glasses and an off-white jacket. Today, I'm joined by Anna Newton, senior manager of website marketing at AudioEye. Anna is a master in website marketing, strategy, and development, and is the owner and strategist of the AudioEye website. In less than a year, she's increased conversion rates by more than 80% among a slew of other achievements. I've had the privilege of working with Anna on numerous projects, and she is truly a joy to work with. Anna, it's so great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Just real quick, I am a Caucasian woman with wavy red hair wearing a brown jacket. I'm really excited to chat with you, Sojin. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, okay, so I just gave a little intro about who you are and what you do, but I'd love for you to just give us a really quick explanation on what the role of a website marketer is.
Yeah, basically, it's the person who owns the website. So we have the various different channels that go into the website. You have SEO, different things you're working on there. You have paid, um, just various different channels. We're trying to get their social media going on the website. And the website marketer essentially job is to take all that traffic and convert it at the highest outbound rate. So like my job is to look at everyone when they're hopping on the website, to look at all that data and understand what the behavior flow is like and try to convert the largest number of people to whatever desired goal may be. So if it's request demos for some people, it might be more purchases in a shopping cart, but it just makes sure that the website is fully optimized so people that are using it can get to the place that they need to as simple as possible.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, like in today's business environment, what do you feel like makes a website optimization marketer successful?
I say there's a whole slew and number of things. But I think the biggest thing is just being adaptable and wanting to learn more, be okay to make mistakes, learning more about new trends. Something that worked 10 years ago isn't going to work today. 10 years ago, some of the trends were like, do a bunch of pop-ups on your screen. And that was what everyone did. And now it's just as the marketing, environment and personas change. That's not something that people really typically do. And so kind of understanding your people you're selling to, your ICP, ideal customer profile there, and just really understanding what they're looking for and needing. And so I think kind of putting that at the center really helps there.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I feel like being like up to date on trends and what other people are doing, what customers actually or users care about and what they like and what they don't like is so important. So I love that. Well, given your experience and your expertise specifically in website optimization and strategy, I was wondering, could you give our listeners some top tips for what organizations should look for when it comes to improving their website conversions?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple that like I obviously go to pretty quickly. First and foremost, kind of what I said earlier, is just really understanding your users and their journeys. If you don't know who's hopping onto your website, if you don't know who you're selling to, you really don't know what kind of messaging you're gonna go for. So that one, very first and foremost, like doing research on that, understanding, what their motivations are, who you're selling to can really like help build out that full journey on your website. Because if you're selling to a group of people that just doesn't purchase you and that's why you optimize on it, it's not going to work. And so you have to understand where they're coming from, maybe job titles, different things like that, and then what kind of things they're interacting with, and then you kind of take it from there. And then the next things from there, obviously having clear and compelling CTAs. Really want to make sure that whatever your main CTAs are just super easy to find. Like if you're wanting to check out, make it really simple and easy. Don't make it a difficult process. You want to keep that wording simple. I think sometimes we get really stuck in our technical jargon, especially like in the tech world, and being like, oh, all these different things. And we drill down and everyone knows what this means, but most time people don't. And they usually only have about 10 seconds tops on a landing page. And so you have to make it worth their while and making it simple so someone can instantly understand it. And then obviously personalizing for that user. And so there's times where, you might have an ideal customer profile you're going after, but there could be more specifics. Or like say if you were selling specific things to different states and you wanted to customize it, you could customize, say, best X, Y, and Z for Utah. And there's a lot of different platforms that allow you to do those A to B testing platforms. Another thing is just a simplified navigation. Simplified navigation is going to be pretty key. You know, if you don't know how to get around your website and understand what you're doing pretty quickly, it's going to lead to a lot of dead ends. And so simplified navigation is really important. And then one thing I think that people really overlook, which actually kind of can start playing in since the very beginning, is actually digital accessibility. And people don't think about it a whole ton, but it's actually kind of like I do a little bit of an analogy with it. Like if you think about how like cooks work in a kitchen and like chefs, like they kind of have everything lined up perfectly and there's order to it and everything. They think about what possibly could happen. They're worried about like dietary restrictions, all these different things. And so everything's flowing correctly. So if anything slips or happens wrong, they always have everything ready to go. And so if you don't have an organized kitchen, regardless of what happens, it's going to cost you time and energy and money to go back and fix those errors. And
Mm.
so a lot of times when you're doing accessibility and like digital accessibility for, you know, 1/4 the population that has some sort of disability, um, people often kind of do it because they feel like they have to, rather than they're like, actually, like maybe we should do it. But a lot of times it actually creates a better experience. It can help with SEO, it can help with website conversion. And it's just like best practices. If you start with your design with that, if you start with your, you know, your dev when you're developing all those things, if you're doing when you're building the website, it just means it's going to be a better experience for actually everyone, not even just those people who are experiencing disabilities, since we kind of move more towards, you know, inclusivity and making it so everyone can use the website regardless of all that. And in general, like it's kind of like with the cooks in the kitchen. If you just do it right the first time, it's going to be saving you so much time and energy. But if you have a big kitchen, you haven't done it right, some people are going to get overwhelmed having to go back and reorganize, but it will pay off in the long run. So that's one thing that people tend to overlook a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I've literally never thought of that analogy before. I always think about digital accessibility more from like the end user perspective and how that works. But really taking on the approach of like, no, you're the chef in the kitchen. And like even just thinking about cooking myself, like usually when you're following a recipe, like there's specific steps and orders in which you do things. And if for whatever reason you mess up and you do something out of order, oftentimes you just wasted all of your ingredients. Like if you mixed your wet and your dry too soon or didn't do the right steps, it can totally mess up the end product. And to recognize that too far down the line and then have to go back and redo it is like, yeah, like you said, it's a waste of resources, it's a waste of time. All of a sudden your launch or your like delivery date is pushed back. And so, yeah, I really love that analogy. I've never heard that before, but that's super fun.
Yeah, I just think that it's something that, you know, people are like, "Oh, we're fine. We don't need to do that." But then and it's where they go back and they're doing accessibility and it's a big task so they can be kind of overwhelmed by it. But once you really have the method down originally, like, you know, some of the very beginning, it saves so much time in the long run and it's just a better overall experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually feel like there's a lot of overlap between the strategy and optimization standpoint as well as design when it comes to websites. And like you had mentioned with simplified navigation, like we're currently working on that as a team right now at AudioEye, and we're always trying to find that balance of like how do we incorporate really clear simple messaging that allows people to understand where this is going to take me while also trying to incorporate like fun visuals like iconography or other like supportive visuals that would make it look more interesting. And I'm constantly balancing between the two of like what's supportive, what's going to be the best layout, how can I make sure that the person who isn't familiar with our industry actually knows what this link is going to go to. And you had kind of mentioned that earlier, like using industry jargon. I feel like we get really hung up with that. Like, oh, sure, everyone knows what this is because we're always looking at it. We're constantly like thinking about it. But for someone who's never really thought about it before, it might be the first time they've ever seen that. And so I totally agree. I love that the way that some of the strategy aligns with some of the design decisions that we have to make. It allows for a lot of really wonderful collaboration, I feel like, between the two of our teams.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always like, especially with your team, like your guys' team is always phenomenal and have like that background and being able to do all these things. And I've worked at other companies where we've had to kind of go back and like retrain people and being like and reset things. And I think that just kind of the back and forth and you already have that strong foundation has helped it a lot. And even with like we mentioned, like this keeping the wording simple back to that, like I heard a great analogy once and it was talking about like, not analogy, but a saying where experts can explain to other experts what they do, but
Mhm.
true like experts can explain someone who knows nothing about the field and help them understand it. And I feel like sometimes when you get a little bit too caught up in it, you're like, oh, all these different jargons and words that I'm using, and you forget that not everyone understands that. And um, there's times where literally when I'm doing like the website, like I will pull up people I know that are other marketers and be like, hey, can I just real quick like show you, you know nothing about about what we do, but like, what do you think we do? Like pulling up
Mhm.
a page and asking them, people that honestly like don't know much about accessibility at all, that maybe don't work in the field or anything like that, and really just like allows you to kind of take a step back and like kind of understand, okay, like what am I trying to say here, but what am I actually saying? So it kind of is marrying those two things.
So I love that. You had just mentioned, earlier about how digital accessibility is often overlooked, especially when it comes to website strategy and optimization, but also in design as well. And I know you and I both know from our work here at AudioEye just how big of a difference accessibility can play in creating a website that really gets results. And you kind of mentioned a couple of those things earlier, but just from your standpoint, from strategy side of things, what would you say what your business case is for accessibility?
Well, kind of back to what I mentioned before, a fourth of people have a disability, and that's like whether it's visible or invisible. And so that's such a large percentage of the population. And so if you think about it, it's like essentially you're closing the doors of your business to, like, most people are online nowadays. Most people are on websites. You know what I mean? Like that's where most people get business. And you're closing that opportunity to serve or be customers, have customers for 25% of the population. And if someone went to a CEO and said, hey, I can instantly increase even 10% of people coming in, 20%, that's huge. And so
Yeah.
that alone, it's like essentially like if you were to slam the door on a customer and say, nope, you're not allowed in here. And so I think that alone is just putting that into perspective. But also, besides that one fourth stat, kind of back to the inclusivity. If you just make your website accessible, there's so many different times where someone who doesn't even have a disability might be able to use it more. Say someone's trying to watch your video and they're on the subway and they don't have headphones in.
Hmm.
And they can't, there's no captions. You forgot to put captions on. So suddenly it's inaccessible to them. Suddenly, they thought maybe I'm not actually gonna watch this. Maybe I'm gonna do this another time. Maybe they're trying to check out and it's confusing, or it's not working the way it should be working, or different things like that. And so there's so many different instances where there you're excluding people that would naturally would be there. And then in general, even people who don't like have those instances, it's just a better experience. And so you're going to be increasing, potentially your sales, your conversion rate, all those different things like that. And then also how Google actually reads a lot of people's websites for SEO. It goes through, heading, it's going through links and different things like that, how it reads it, it's reading, it's kind of an automated system. It actually, if you make your website accessible and truly accessible, not just slapping, an AI kind of toolbar kit on the side, you know, it actually allows it to read it easier, and can help increase your SEO there. We did have some people that worked with us as well that it honestly like pretty quickly helped increase their overall revenue from, like, I think it was like 7% or something like that. And then kind of even going back to just, people with disability, it's like, I think worldwide, the stat was something like $13 trillion, that they could be spending. And all these businesses, like, you could be taking a part of that. And I think a lot of times, like, there's a lot of people that are wanting to buy things, that are wanting to purchase whatever you're offering, and they're not able to. And so I think there's a lot of benefits for the business. Again, a lot of people come into accessibility because they feel like they have to, or it's just another thing they have to check off their list.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're saying, they come people and be like, how can we get accessible as fast as possible? Can we slap on, a widget and make it accessible? And that doesn't actually fix the issue. It just like makes you look like you're fixing the issue, but then it doesn't actually make it accessible. And so people that are actually hopping on the website who are wanting to increase that, if you want to increase your revenue by actually making it accessible, you have to truly go through and do that. Go in your coding, have testers that with our disabilities, that can go through and actually test it to see if it is able to be used, because that's when you truly accessible that way. That's when you really have the user experience go up. That's when you have that increase in spending, not when you put a sticker over something that wasn't like, it's like putting like a sticker on a box and saying these are shoes, but there's not shoes inside because no one checked it, right? And so you're not actually going to have that increase if you're not actually, doing the accessibility. So it's kind of doing it, making sure it's simple, but like in the right ways. There's been different times in the past. I have autism and ADHD, and sometimes I'm a little bit dyslexic, and I've tried using the widget some other companies, but just before I even worked here. And it was difficult to use, and it actually wasn't working correctly, and it messed up my page, and I was just trying to buy a blanket, and so it actually was, I was like, "Oh, darn," like, I couldn't ever actually really see what was going on because the contrast was too low, like, it was really hard to see, what the wording was. I was trying to learn more about it, and I ended up not being able to, and so that's almost like coming from it being like, you can increase your spending, but you have to make sure you do it in the right way, so.
Yeah, no, I love that you called out so many different benefits there. And there's so many, there's like a lot of overlap between what you're doing and the way that you're thinking about it from a strategy perspective, that also from a design perspective, I'm constantly thinking about. You had just mentioned color contrast, like knowing things that like color contrast, text size, heading hierarchy, all of those things really improve the overall experience for all users. It's not just people with disabilities. And I don't personally identify as someone with a disability, but I always notice when my eyes are straining because the text is too small on a website, or the gray text is too light, or that you had a great call out about captions on videos on social media and things like that. Like even when I'm watching movies and TV, I'm always watching things with subtitles on. And so I don't think it just pertains just to people with disabilities, though you made a great point that 25% of people in the US have a disability. That's a huge statistic, but it's not just those people. It's so inclusive of all people. And so really taking that universal approach to design and strategy is so important. And so I really love that you shared those examples. Um, I'd love to know from your perspective also, just like how can web teams begin to prioritize accessibility and create accessible websites, knowing some of these benefits?
Yeah, so when with AudioEye, like one of our founders, his brother was having degenerative eye disease, and he was kind of having a hard time being able to see online. And so that's originally kind of why AudioEye kind of came about, is realize that there was such a gap between people being able to even use, websites. And so we understand there's a lot of things that go in and out of doing accessibility. So you can use a company like us, when we work with people that have disabilities that are actually testing it. We're doing manual things as well as, you do have the different various things, you can, the AI portion, but we really go so much deeper than that. And that's kind of really just taking it over for you so you don't have to stress. You can totally try to get a tiger team at it. I've worked at the last company, where we had a full tiger team, and it took a couple years to try to get everything together. It is a lot slower if you try to do it in-house, but there is a lot of tools and stuff like that you can kind of try to do. But I would just recommend finding either resources online. We have a lot of great ones that kind of explain about accessible design, different ways that you guys can approach it. There's a lot of other places if you're just curious, like with CAG standards, stuff like that. They can kind of point you in the right direction. But essentially, you kind of want to start from the ground up. And I mean, sometimes you do have to go back and see like where your website's at and stuff like that, and kind of do an audit and different like things like that. Like I know that there is I think it's the Wave tool, which can kind of give you a little bit of snippet if you're wanting to start out from the beginning. We also have a scanner on our website, so you can kind of scan your website to see where I'm at, kind of, and then you can always sign up for a free trial as well with that. But I would really just say, like, it was kind of trying to figure out where you're going to go with there, whether you're working with an agency, whether you're working by yourself, understanding what the standards are, what needs to happen, building that kind of going in and having a plan going forward. And the ideal state will always never be like going backwards to fix it. Right now, it's going to probably be because people build without doing that. But you want to fix it, and then moving forward, always just keep it in mind. So that means it starts from the very beginning stages, from design, then to coding, then to like front forward facing things and just alt text and stuff like that. And so it's just starting from the ground up and building from there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I totally agree. It is a huge undertaking, and it's not realistic to assume that everyone has the time, resources or know-how to even do that. And so finding a solution that works for you makes a ton of sense. And, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier about really understanding your audience or your customer, I feel like one of the things, like from like a design perspective, that I've really come to realize is that it's not often enough that designers or marketers, or even including people with disabilities into that segment. And so really trying to focus more broadly, even from, like you said, a strategy perspective, and incorporating that into your processes and your workflows is so important. So Anna, thank you so much. This has been such a lovely conversation. And as we're wrapping up, I'd love to just ask, like, what other parting words of wisdom would you like to share with our audience?
I think I just would just reiterate, just really keep your user in mind. And I think that I always go back to that. I had a degree in sociology, so I love understanding behavior and why they do things, but keeping that user in mind, and then kind of just what you mentioned, remembering when you're thinking about that user that there's a good chance that there's going to be a situation or possibly they have a disability, just different various things, like even something you mentioned squinting sometimes when you see like that small text. My grandma can't even see anything that's not filling up her whole screen. So there's so many different things there. And so it's keeping your user in mind, thinking about what's their behavior like, what are they looking for, making sure they can actually view things, making sure that they can actually access your website. And so I would go back to that time and time again. I think that's your strongest point, because if you really keep your buyer's journey in mind, what they're looking for, what their needs are, making sure, like, and I always go through a lot of the journeys and flows potential users will go through. And then just don't be afraid to try new things. I think things can be really daunting at times. And so I'm always A/B testing. I'm always learning. And, even if a test, quote unquote, fails and like maybe our control was a little bit, was higher than our variation, that's a lesson learned. And so I'm always big on just testing new things.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I love that about you. And I love how you've really helped implement a new testing strategy and just like a new practice that we haven't really had before here at AudioEye. So yeah, it's been wonderful having you a part of that process and really driving that. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Anna. It has been so great to have you on the show. And for our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. HearSay Shorts is produced by Sojin Rank, Mike Barton, Mariella Pualino, Missy Jensen, and Max Ivey. Edited by Alex Dorrier. If you enjoyed this podcast and don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.